Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, directed by Christopher McQuarrie and starring Tom Cruise, follows Ethan Hunt and the IMF team continuing to search and destroy the terrifying AI known as the Entity. Joined by new allies and armed with the means to shut the Entity down for good, Hunt enters a race against time to prevent the world as we know it from changing forever. Okay, so for context, I've only seen one Mission Impossible movie, being Part 1 or Dead Reckoning. This is kind of a disclaimer because if there are big callbacks to the original series in this movie, I definitely won't get it. I was hoping to watch the Mission Impossible movies this month, but I did the Karate Kid movies instead, which was probably a bad idea. I'll still definitely try to check them all out when I have the time, since I really like Dead Reckoning. I originally just thought it was pretty good, but now I think it's great. It's an 8. Anyways, based on the trailers and my knowledge of the last film, this looks pretty good. I really don't know how they're gonna top themselves here. I don't know if the Mission Impossible franchise is known for its crazy stunts, but if it is like this last film implies, they really gotta top 7 movies of crazy stunts, and Tom Cruise is pretty old, so I don't know how much he can handle. They really don't show a lot of what's gonna happen in this movie, so it's hard to tell what the crazy stunt will be, though if I had to guess, it's probably something to do with an airplane. But there might be something even more extreme than that. It looks like we're gonna flesh out the Entity more, which is nice. It looks like Paris is back, not 100% sure, but it looks like her. She's like the best character in Dead Reckoning, so I would like to see her again. Overall, after watching and enjoying Dead Reckoning a lot more, my anticipation for this has gone up a lot. Pretty excited for this. Okay, I'm gonna go watch the movie now, so I'll be back with initial thoughts. Okay, I actually forgot to do initial thoughts this time, but I'll just give my thoughts right now. I thought it was very good. I've changed my score multiple times. I just can't decide. I think it has a lot of issues, like a lot of people are pointing out, but the stuff he does is insane. It's insane what he does. So I don't know. I think I have a score settled on, but it's pretty close between one number and the other number. It's really good, though. It's a crazy good movie. It might be my favorite film of the year. I don't know. I guess I'll come to that conclusion at the end of this video. But, yeah, let's just get into my full review. In Dead Reckoning, the Entity isn't really a character. Gabriel mostly represents the Entity in third person. However, in the Final Reckoning, the two are much more separated. I like the Entity a lot more in this movie because it's an actual villain. I do have issues with the Entity that I'll get into in the bad section of this review, but for the most part, it felt like a big step up from an already cool concept. The Entity is a much bigger threat in this film. We have a slight time skip from the last film, so the Entity is now in way more control, basically controlling a large chunk of the world. It is now able to control and trace any form of technology, which leads to some really intense sequences that are directly caused by the Entity screwing stuff up. This also happens in the last film, and those moments are great, but now the Entity is on a much larger scale. By larger scale, I mean the Entity begins interfering with real life. In Dead Reckoning, the Entity could obviously only influence technology, but now there's a cult around the Entity with millions of members. This puts much more pressure around the film because anyone could be working or worshipping the Entity. It's also kind of confirmed at the start that several cult members are attempting to rise in the government, so pretty much everyone Hunt is working with could be an agent for the Entity. It gets set up at the start, but only really starts playing a role in the film towards the end, leading the actual twist to really catch me off guard because I literally forgot about the cult aspect of this movie. The Entity itself is also directly communicating with characters here. I really love how the Entity refers to itself in the third person. It really isn't a human or even considers itself a human. The Entity only directly interacts with the cast one time though. For most of the film, just like the first, it's mostly hidden in the shadows or talking through Gabriel. The Entity is really great in this movie. They managed to make an even greater, more threatening presence off an already threatening villain. Since we're talking about the Entity, we might as well talk about Gabriel. Gabriel's cool, I like him. He's kind of just the same as the last film, but a lot more off the rails and reckless. He mostly just represents the Entity in a lot of scenes though, so his character still isn't super fleshed out. For other characters, Paris is in fact still alive. She's still probably my favorite character in these two movies. She's mostly dead set on shooting Gabriel in the face, which is really fun. She really doesn't get to do a ton, but she's still my favorite character. Probably preferred her in Dead Reckoning, and they didn't need to bring her back, but she's still great here. For the last character that I want to talk about, Luther. His role in this movie did hit pretty hard, especially his role in the ending. Alright, since this is the last film, I'm guessing this is the one with the highest stakes in the franchise. Maybe, I'm not sure. But the mission in this film is so off the rails and insane that it completely destroys part 1 in stakes. I don't want to spoil the actual mission obviously, but Ethan is intentionally trying to bring himself to the brink of death in order to win. He literally has to almost die in order for the mission to succeed. The mission being this insane is one thing, but what really makes these stakes shine is the fact that everyone is constantly getting setbacks, making it even harder to accomplish. They just keep adding more and more impossible tasks on top of this already seemingly impossible mission. It's great, I'm sure the other movies do this, I mean Dead Reckoning already does this, but this movie is on a whole nother level. Alright, time to talk about the obvious best part of this movie. The stunts in this are absolutely insane, but what's more surprising is that the action and fight scenes were also incredible. I thought the action in Dead Reckoning was pretty good but nothing outstanding, but the action here was almost as tense as the actual stunts, which is a crazy step up in quality. Both of these aspects are where the intense moments come from, and that's where this and I'm pretty sure most Mission Impossible movies are at their peak. The fight scene between the soldiers is so good. I think what really makes it click is how well directed and paced it is. It's built up for a long time, wondering whether or not these two sides are gonna fight, and both sides are extremely competent, so the moment they both notice something off, they just get right into it. The fight itself is so well coordinated and it's edited perfectly with the other plots in the movie. To be vague, part of the group is trying to get Ethan info, and the soldiers were in the way, so they had to fight. What makes this really work is the fact that they not only have to win against highly trained soldiers, but also get Ethan the information in time while they're all fighting. Literally during the fight scene, we're intercutting with Ethan running out of time. So during this battle, we have to anxiously watch as the characters try to communicate to Ethan in time while still trying to survive and actually win. It's easily one of my favorite scenes in the movie. The intercutting was so well done. Now what's crazy is that the same idea of a ticking clock intercut with action is pushed to an even further extreme in the final fight. I won't get into it for spoilers, but I can paint a picture of how it felt. Imagine that fight scene from earlier, but it's an actual full-on real Tom Cruise stunt that morphs into the final fight. How did he do this? Why would he do this? The stunt itself is insane and so dangerous, but it's the fact that Tom Cruise himself had to purposely almost die several times. Like if he messed this up, he would probably actually die, so he has to attempt to almost die but succeed so the scene actually works. Plus the entire time he's like getting flung around, it's like they're actually trying to kill him here. So replace that already great fight scene from earlier with an actual real insane stunt, and then add on that Ethan has to win the fight or everyone is gonna die, and then throw on a ticking timer. It takes the idea for this already incredible scene, then pushes it even further to the absolute extreme. The editing here is actually perfect. They cut between this fight scene with the other plot so well. I didn't calm down once we were no longer witnessing this insane stunt. We're still seeing extremely stressful down to the minute moments. They all flow together so well so that once we cut back to Ethan, it's still extremely stressful. This is probably my favorite scene of the year so far. Once they actually succeed, the stunt keeps going. Again, don't want to get into detail, but they keep pushing it. Like if Tom Cruise really does his stunts in multiple takes, I have no idea why or how he kept doing this to himself. This is one of the most intense theater experiences I've seen in a while. Like I desperately need to see the other Mission Impossible movies. Do they ever get this insane? Let me know in the comments. Okay, last thing before I get into the bad stuff. Is this the last Mission Impossible? I really thought it was going in, and I was really worried about it because I figured they would make a big moment for fans of the franchise, and I obviously wouldn't get it. However, the ending for this was pretty open-ended, honestly. I really liked how casual and normal it all felt, and the scene right beforehand explaining everything that happened after the major events of Final Reckoning were really powerful and great. Those scenes felt like a very strong conclusion to the franchise, but this actual last scene was really open-ended. Like it was added last second. I can't say my full thoughts on how this ended. Maybe it actually is a reference to the other movies and I just don't get it. I really liked the ending, but I can't say for certain this is the last Mission Impossible, which felt a little off. Alright, I praised the entity before, but it does have issues. The actual scene of the entity talking to Ethan was a little weak. Like, it's cool it refers to itself in the third person and all, but that's kind of all I got out of it. Plus, everything it tells Ethan just all ends up not happening, so I guess it isn't that smart. Gabriel is good, but his actual motivations as a person and not just a puppet for the entity isn't great. I did prefer him just being a puppet for the entity in Dead Reckoning over what they did with his character here. Also, the entity should have been a lot more scary and controlling. Like, it possesses a great threat here, but the entity itself isn't super smart. Like, a lot of these people have to outsmart and trick the entity, but no one slips up. Pretty much everyone is able to trust Ethan, which is apparently something that the entity didn't think would happen. I don't know, the entity kind of comes across as dumb in the Final Reckoning, which might be intentional, but didn't really fit the narrative I feel like the movie was trying to push. Final Reckoning has kind of whack pacing. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as people are saying though. It only really applies to maybe the first hour, and it's not even that bad during the first hour, just kind of off. Final Reckoning does seem to skip around at points, like the traveling. We just kind of teleport to new locations at points. The opening title card is also a lot worse than the last film. I think it was just put at a really weird part of this film that could have been put in 5 much better spots. I don't know, that's just me though. Lastly, I think we see the entity way too fast in the film. It feels kind of anticlimactic. Other than the kinda weak first hour, the rest of the pacing is all great. Okay, I praised all the stunts previously, but maybe the underwater segment of this film is a little boring. I was kinda spacing out during it, it just went for too long and doesn't communicate info very well. This is kinda the big moment that Dead Reckoning was building up, and while the plan to find the entity source code is still insane and super fun, this one segment of actually going to the submarine, specifically the underwater segment, is kind of boring. I think they could have cut this down more, or if they wanted to make it long for the impact, they should have just executed it better. For what is trying to be one of the most stressful moments in the movie, I didn't really feel it, especially compared to the other insane stunts I talked about previously. This part is kind of boring and probably my least favorite scene in all of Final Reckoning. Okay, biggest issue with Final Reckoning, the flashbacks and exposition. This really was only an issue in the first hour or so. This movie has a lot of callbacks to previous events in the Mission Impossible franchise, and whenever they do this, they play footage to fit it. Now, I haven't seen the other Mission Impossible movies, so this was actually kind of helpful since it helped me figure out what was going on, but I really think they should have done these flashbacks better, rather than just repeating the gimmick of playing footage from the previous movies with a slightly more ugly filter. They do this in Dead Reckoning, but it's really only at the start, so it's not that big of a deal. Here it happens like 15 times. The start, the exposition, the entity origin, the government, it happens so much and they never switch it up. It's always the same presentation. Thankfully, once they set up all the exposition, we really get no more flashbacks. Plus, some of these flashbacks do have good payoff. If I had seen the other Mission Impossible movies before this, I probably would have found this aspect of Final Reckoning to be really bad, but since I haven't seen them, this was excusable and kinda helpful to know what was going on. Overall, yeah, this was amazing. I really loved Final Reckoning. I really gotta watch the other Mission Impossible movies after this to see if my thoughts change, but for now it's my favorite film of the year so far. Favorite aspects are gonna be the stunts, the action, and mission stakes. Worst aspects are gonna be repetition of flashbacks, the submarine, and pacing at the start. I've kind of struggled with the score throughout this review, but I've settled on it. I'm gonna give Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning a low 9 out of 10. Might be a high 8, I can't really decide, but I gotta give it to The Final Reckoning. This is my favorite film of the year so far, so yeah, really strong start to the summer. I took a bit of a break, so it's good to be back to doing this, and I'll probably keep up the schedule since it's summer now. Massive, probably hour-long video coming at the end of the month, so look out for that. Lots of stuff coming out in the following weeks, plus Deltarune dropping, so yeah, I got a lot of stuff to do. I make weekly reviews, so subscribe if you're interested, and I make a big video at the end of each month, so also look out for that. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, and this is in a big outro.